Welcome to Marketing Brew Weekly, Morning Brew Inc.'s podcast for the marketing industry. I'm Jenny Mywin.
I'm Kelsey Sutton.
And I'm Katie Hicks.
You guys, how are we feeling about America's 250th birthday this year?
Ooh, I think that we are probably not the only people who have complex feelings about it.
Yeah, kind of a mixed bag.
In fact, I believe a record low U.S. adults said they were quote, extremely or, quote, very proud to be an American. That is per Gallup. The stat is 58%, which is still above half.
Yeah, but that's significantly down, right?
It's down 9 points from last year and down nearly 30 points from when the firm first polled Americans about their pride in January 2001. So that is a big, I think, indicator of how the country is feeling about it.
And kind of hard for a brand to navigate if you want to get in on the celebration, if you don't. Right. But I think for some brands, like the Americana brands, like the Coca-Colas, the Fords, the ones that have made being American really a part of their brand message, they're still celebrating. We're seeing some campaigns come out from them.
Yeah, I think it's just a significant moment to acknowledge because it feels like big milestone birthdays, historic moments always used to be like an easy, like, of course, like there's no risk in celebrating this. But in this current cultural moment, it doesn't quite feel that way. But all that to say, like there is, as you said, Katie, still value in being associated with America. A lot of these brands that have Americana as like a core part of their identity are like very well performing brands. So there is something to think about whether you're going all the way in, part way in, taking a step back for sure. So it's kind of got us all thinking like, how are these companies like towing the line with their America 250 campaigns? And what do brands have to consider when these monocultural celebrations become possibly divisive as they currently can be? We'll try to answer that. But first, are you out of breath trying to keep up with AI and all the changes it's constantly creating?
It can be exhausting, we know. That's why Morning Brew created a new podcast with PwC called The Intelligence Shift.
This 8-episode series focuses on how AI is changing and disrupting different industries. Topics span from the music industry's reckoning with AI to how HR is using AI to scout top talent.
An impressive roster of leaders joins host Dan Priest to discuss real stories and real lessons learned from AI.
If you're looking for trusted guidance about how to turn AI strategy into action, this show is for you.
Take a breather and learn from experts with experience. Listen to The Intelligence Shift wherever you get your podcasts.
So something that I think is great is Christina Monlos on our team, our senior reporter. She really dug into how brands are trying to answer this question. So thank you, Christina, in advance. You really helped us as we thought about what we wanted to talk about on this episode. So some of the things that we've seen is there are a lot of brands who have taken this entire year. They've known America 250 is not like a surprise. You're not like,
right. I feel like arguably brands have been planning for it for a long time.
And they released the logo. Do you remember like last year, I remember writing about this, the logo came out, everyone was like, what is that? It's not well received. But yeah, there's been building anticipation for what America 250 will look like beyond just its own branding.
Yes, absolutely. And so brands have had a really long time to think about this. And I think this year is a really interesting one because it's not just America 250, but it's also an Olympic year, and it's also a World Cup year. Mm-hmm. And I think that those are big moments where patriotism reigns supreme. People feel this huge connection as they're watching these big sporting events with the American athletes, or the Team USA athletes in the case of, both of them. So I think the thing that's really interesting is that we've seen some brands who have rolled this out very early. Hershey's is one of them that comes to mind. They did a big push around the Olympics earlier this year. And that's just kind of rolling directly into all of the things that could then kind of just be changed, tweaked, adjusted for the summer.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting setup going into it because it is all kind of part of an America 250 campaign. But if you start it with the Olympics, you start it with the World Cup, or you do all of that and it rolls into America 250, it doesn't feel like it's only America 250, which does kind of align your brand differently than if you were not participating in some of these other big patriotic moments throughout the year, because it feels like you're potentially taking more of a political stance, or you're just celebrating this like inherently ties to a political moment, even though being political is obviously the last thing most brands want. So I do think there's an interesting opportunity with this. that might not be happening in other years.
Yeah, and I wonder if America 250 didn't align with the World Cup in the timing, like being in July, if we would see as many brands participating. But I do feel like a lot of the ones that I've seen have been World Cup adjacent, like tapping into that patriotism of like root for the U.S. team as this is going on.
Yeah, it's interesting because like rooting for sports will always like have this desire to be non-political, even though like you are tying your sports team to a specific country. But that has always been like a rooting spirit behind sports fandom, and now like patriotism too, for potentially this time period when people are navigating like complex feelings about the country and the political state that we are in.
Something I thought was really interesting is like when we were talking about making this episode, we were saying 4th of July is not really like a huge marketing tentpole on people's calendars. Often maybe it's tied to a sales event or maybe a limited edition thing, or like, here, make a red, white, and blue cake. And
or like those old Navy t-shirts with the flag that they used to sell. Actually, they might still sell them, but I remember getting those in the 90s.
It's almost like it's like barbecue adjacent.
Yeah, it's about summer more than it is about July 4th.
And I think that's like a really interesting thing. I think some brands are maybe going back and looking at that playbook and have gone, what do we normally do? What makes sense? Do we up the ante a little bit, but in a way that again, and I think again, knowing that there's a giant portion of the population who are looking around at like what's happening in the news and are going, I don't know how I feel about this moment. I think that's kind of a low stakes way of getting in on it. Something I think is also really interesting. I'd love to know your thoughts on this, Jenny Mai and Katie, is we have some brands that are tying their own anniversaries to America 250. So Budweiser is celebrating 150 years. And I think that they are definitely an Americana brand. And Jeep is also celebrating 85 years. So they're kind of tying their own brand anniversaries to America 250. And I think what the case they're sort of aiming to make in the messaging is like, here we are. Like our brand and America, and American history are like completely intertwined.
Yeah.
And I think that, I don't know, what do you think about those approaches?
Yeah, I saw that Jeep's campaign has to do with Captain America. So I feel like they're trying to take a very non-political approach to this. Like, it's our anniversary and look, a Marvel character, like keeping it very apolitical in that way and just trying to tap into like cultural interests at large.
There's like cultural goodwill there for like any Marvel fan, any superhero fan. It's like, oh, like I just like love this character, and there's like a brand bringing him back to top of mind. I do think that when you are positioned as a brand to emphasize like how long you have been around, and then you tie it to like this historical celebration, which is ultimately acknowledging how long America has been around, you kind of get to play both sides of like, oh, we are tapping into Americana and America's history, and we are celebrating that. We're not like shying away from that. But also, it's not just about America. It's about us too. Like, it's about how long we have been around. And you kind of get to like play both sides of like, we have our own history that is worth celebrating, and there is a historical moment being talked about right now. So amazing that we get to talk about all of this at once, and like there's something there for everyone to celebrate and to be happy about, whether that's like you have had a Jeep before and you like have like happy memories tied to that, or you are someone that like really wants to celebrate the 4th of July. It kind of like lets you do both things, which is not easy to accomplish if you don't have that storied history as a brand.
Yeah, and I think that the nostalgia factor is really powerful. We talk about the power of nostalgia in marketing of all stripes, but it kind of allows a brand to sidestep the sort of current political climate or, administration decisions, and kind of focus on the past that people feel more positive about. I think in that Gallup poll that we mentioned at the top of the episode, there's also a huge percentage of Americans think that the best days of America are behind us. And I think that if you take that statistic and then you kind of apply it to this looking back, like historic archival footage or old, references to old ads or old bottles of product, etc. Like there is that element of kind of remember when
the good old days.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I feel like that is an opportunity for brands who have this history to dig into their archives and show that they have been around for so long and they have this ability to do that. But it makes me wonder, I'm curious what you guys think. Do you think that there is a way for newer brands to tap into historical celebrations like America 250? Is there a way to do it in a way that is exciting or is pleasing or is like looking towards the future? If you just came into existence this year, 10 years ago even.
I think the sports avenue is the way to do it. I think, to your point earlier, like if you're rooting for America, it's pretty non-controversial in the case of the World Cup or in the Olympics. So I think for a newer brand that wants to get in on it, it's like cheer for your fellow Americans out on the field and not, looking at like, just cheer for America in general.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think something that I think about though is like, how do you, and maybe this is a tangent, but like, okay, think about the World Cup, think about all the international fans that are coming in. I think that there's actually a little bit of a risk to a brand that's going too rah about Team USA or like the men's team in like, because there's going to be all these international fans.
Right.
And I was thinking about earlier, I believe was it last year or earlier this year? I'm forgetting. But when sort of these tariffs on other countries started rolling out from the current administration, and it was really creating a backlash for American brands who are global, who like maybe American first, but now they have big presences in other countries. I think of Canada in particular, like their consumer base really rallied against American brands that were imported into Canada. And like, there was a big question of how do we win these consumers back? So I think that there's a little bit of a dance that these brands that have big global audiences need to consider, because you're not just reaching the U.S. fan if you're marketing around the World Cup. You're not just reaching, like people who are really plugged into America 250. You're going to be reaching people from all over the world who have maybe traveled in and are, taking in America, as a tourist, but also are bringing with them a lot of their own national pride. So I think it's a really interesting kind of time. I think there's a balance.
At the same time, though, I don't know if you guys have seen these posts, but it's been really like heartening to see some of these like small towns or like states in the middle of the country embracing international tourists coming in. And I feel like I've seen so many posts from people like, there was like one in particular that I remember where it was like a woman from Sweden being like, I've never tried ranch before. This is incredible. So I feel like there's almost a marketing moment there for like, the creators of ranch or something to market around that and be like, we're proud to be American. Like, we love our ranch or something like that.
Yeah. Right. You're kind of seeing the country through new eyes, through people who are kind of visiting maybe for the first time or experiencing it. And I think that's a really joyful moment for brands to be able to tap into if they can figure out how to do it.
I thought about the tariff thing too, to your point earlier about how some of these brands have been leaning into this messaging since around then, like saying like, we're made in America as a way to kind of like signal to the current administration that they are on their side and they support, or, they don't want to be targeted maybe. So I feel like this messaging is something that we've seen from brands over the last 2 years now. And it's interesting to see like it continue into America 250.
Yeah. I think something that is kind of missing in especially the America 250 campaigns that I've rolled out throughout the year so far is, like you said, Kelsey, a lot of it is tied to nostalgia. And I think in Christina's piece, she references at the bicentennial, so in 1976, there was also thought about like, there were plenty of political things going on at the time that like Americans probably were not happy with as well, but there was a lot of thought towards the future of like what America could be. And as you said earlier, it feels right now it's like, like there is like a lot of like the good days of America are behind us. And I'm curious to see if there is an opportunity for brands to kind of like look towards the future of what America could be and like incorporating more of that like positive optimism message of like the elements of community or the elements of like volunteerism and things that are like inherently good things to associate your brand with that are going towards the future rather than looking back. I feel like there is a gap here.
There is one campaign that I cannot think of the brand right now, but it's running based on this idea of multiculturalism. And it's saying like this type of dance was formed by people from this country and this country coming together and forming it, or this food came from people from this country and this country coming together and forming it around the World Cup and around like this point in time. And I can't remember which brand it was, but it is centered on this idea of like people all over the place. And I know Coke also said that was a big part of their campaign, is like emphasizing every corner of America, not alienating any one consumer, and making it clear that like this campaign is for every American.
Right. Yeah. For anyone who hasn't seen the Coke ad, it is like a 3-minute long ad of them going on a road trip throughout all corners of America. And they actually got in the car and like went on a road trip to capture it. And I do think that is an effort to kind of capture that spirit of like, it's not just what happened in the past, but also like what is currently in America right now.
It's kind of embracing the melting pot message that we've
Yeah.
heard. And I feel like that's kind of a rare message at this point in time, but I think it's one that continues to resonate. I mean, this is something that we've been talking about for years. It's like every consumer, like ultimately as a brand, you want to appeal to as many consumers as possible. So embracing every type of American is a good strategy because you want those people to think highly of your brand.
Right. And I think it also relates to that international audience that you brought up, Kelsey. It's like the more people that you can bring into it also like broadens it outside of an American audience, which is funny to think about because you would think a historical moment like America 250 is inherently mostly for an American audience. But when you are a national, massive brand, international brand like a Coca-Cola, you have to think about these other audiences as well. And why would you only tailor it to one when it could potentially be bringing in a lot more?
If you're Hidden Valley Ranch, you say, look, America's not as bad as you guys thought. Come on over, Europeans, and get some.
That's that Midwest in you. You're like, I love the ranch.
I'm just here to tout ranch. Yeah. That's just my whole job now.
You know what, though? I think that's so fun about that is like kind of saying like, eating ranch is an American experience. Driving a Jeep, that's drinking a Budweiser, like
eating a burger and fries.
Yeah, and watching the football game. Like that's like that's I think such a great unifying feeling. And I think again, this opportunity for brands to say like, can we tap into this feeling of unity and positivity that is kind of garnered from a big events like the World Cup, et cetera? How do we translate that into a message about where we belong in like the story of American history? I think that's like a really kind of amazing opportunity to frame your brand as something more than just a brand, right? Like tying it to an identity of maybe, unity, of, growth, progress. If we talk about what we want to see brands suggest about the future, I think that they have to be kind of optimistic things. But again, I think that's challenging because people there's a lot of concern about the current economic climate, AI affecting jobs and future prospects, et cetera, the housing market. There's so many things that are kind of can push against that. But I also think that there are moments, and I think consumers are hungry for a moment of feeling like, okay, there's something to look forward to, and I think that that's kind of the sweet spot for a lot of brands.
It's kind of the impossible paradox of a marketer's job is like acknowledging when something might be not great in culture as a whole, but also knowing that your job is to figure out a way to position your brand in a good way around that. And also like when brands do that, that does play a part in like culture as a whole shifting, right? It's like if we have a really like impressive, nostalgic, or like future optimistic ad from Coca-Cola and people watch that, that can play a part in shifting the general attitude towards how we feel about patriotism right now. So it's kind of like you have to respond to what culture is doing right now, but you are also a piece of how culture might be shifting, and figuring out like what you want to do in that dance, as you said, Kelsey, is difficult, but kind of the magical part of having influence as a marketer.
It kind of reminds me of the conversation we had around the Super Bowl this year, where it was like a lot of brands just leaned into humor because that's the safe bet, and like not going too political, keeping things very high level, like cute animals and like fun music that we all like, and Americana rock songs that everyone knows, things like that. I feel like that's kind of the tactic we're seeing here, where it's very generalized, it's not too specific, but it's about like what kind of makes people feel good, what brings everyone together, with things like we can all say that we enjoy eating a burger and fries every now and then, or drinking a beer or whatever.
It does remind me of, I just saw like someone posting on Twitter about how when international tourists come to America, they do want to do like very mundane things that are like shown in Hollywood films a lot, of like going to a gas station and eating a burger.
On a road trip.
Yeah, like seeing like
a suburban.
Yes, the suburbs are a crazy experience. And it is, I think it's easy to forget that like a lot of those like normal, ordinary pieces of life are like very American, and having a moment to like look back on that and figure out how your brand fits into that is an interesting puzzle.
I want to ask you, do you think that a brand can sit out America 250 marketing? Because I feel like we've talked about how brands are trying to do it maybe a safe route. Is it safe to just opt out entirely, or is that there's just a risk inherent in saying nothing? And it like, is that a political message too? I don't know. I'd love to know your thoughts.
It's kind of something we talked about the Pride episode too, where it's like, are you saying something by not saying anything at all? But I feel like with this, some brands I think aren't meant to necessarily weigh in on this. Like, I feel like it really is built for the brands that have this like, Americana like heritage brand image to them.
Yeah, I think it would actually be rather off-putting for like very small or like startup brands to kind of do that, because it's like, oh, you just got here, like you really didn't have to acknowledge
Like, I don't
this.
think ChatGPT doing an Americana
Right.
or America 250 ad
Well,
would necessarily be the best received of all of them.
Sure, in terms of a historical standpoint, but like if you want to enmesh yourself as like part of what America is today, there could be an interesting position there. But I do think that when you are a big enough company, you are probably weighing like the actual effects with the political administration if you are not getting in on America 250.
Kind of like with the tariffs thing. Where
Exactly.
It's like, hey, look, no, we're so pro-America, even though what you're doing right now is wildly unpopular.
Right. It's like you kind of have to figure out where you land on that and what you are saying to your consumer versus what you are saying to someone in the actual administration.
You're marketing to many different
Right.
audiences.
Yeah, you have to think about a lot of different people when you're putting out a campaign these days.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, it's definitely something you have to consider. I think from a consumer standpoint, I think people don't tend to notice when you don't do something as much, especially if like it is something that they wouldn't normally be celebrating. But as we have said throughout, like America 250 is a big historic moment. So I do think there is a chance there that people are like, oh, like if Coke wasn't doing something, like because you do associate Coke as an American brand, it's like, oh, why wouldn't you be doing something? Like I do think that makes a political message if you weren't intending to send one out.
It seems expected.
Exactly.
And something I think is really interesting about Coke's approach. So they did this big road trip, as we talked about, but they also re-recorded a song that's "I'd Like to Buy the World a Coke," which is from a very, very famous in Mad Men, famous
The finale of Mad Men.
a very, very famous ad that was also, and that song and that ad was released in a very politically divisive time in America. So kind of borrowing from that, I think that to me signals, there's an acknowledgement that there is this opportunity for unity, and a brand is saying like, we can be a part of that. And whether or not you think a brand can actually be a part of that or not is kind of beside the point. But I think that to me that indicates to me that there's an awareness of the moment and what the right message is, which is like, we're all in this together.
Yeah, definitely. So do you guys think the brands are doing it right? What have you seen that like you feel could be good or could not be good so far?
I saw McDonald's is bringing back their fried apple pie, and
that sold you.
And well, no, I just actually think like a little limited edition thing is like very it's kind of like an easy win. But I was thinking it's like a fan favorite limited edition thing. What's more American than apple pie? I feel like that was probably in the brief, but that just feels like very natural, like of course. And I think the apples are grown in the US. So it's kind of cute. That additional like made in America sort of stamp on it too. So I kind of think it's serving a lot of things. It's like, what do our customers want? And then how can we take that and make it American? And again, apple pie in America.
Yeah. Classic.
Like this.
I feel like it's pulling out just like one piece of something that your brand offers to and tying it to this like cultural celebration and not tying your entire brand to it, which kind of lets you like get in on it without being like America, McDonald's is an American brand, even though like it obviously has a long American history as well, but just dipping a toe in a little bit.
Yeah.
I like that too, more than just like, I know some brands are just like putting an American flag or putting red, white, and blue on their, logos or whatever. I think I like the idea of offering something and having it be tied back to the messaging. And again, I like the idea of the unity messaging a lot. I think the brands that are doing that and really emphasizing the melting pot of it all are doing something that feels very like positive in an otherwise kind of not always the most positive news cycle.
Right. They're pulling out the good bits for sure. Well, thanks so much for joining us today. And if you have thoughts on America 250 or other historic celebrations and what marketers should do about it, send us an email at mkbw@morningbrew.com, which you can also find in the show notes. And we'll catch you next week.